Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about a clip that's been floating around the internet and which purports to show cheating at a fishing derby. So I want to talk about how the Canadian legal system would handle this because it's actually a really interesting question. So first, I guess let's start with the clip.
Yeah, I would.
Jason, we gotta file police.
All of them.
Every single. Jay,
Can't do. I mean, we all can do it. What the f, man?
a filleted fish. Look at this is
A fillet, yeah.
a filleted fish. It's a walleye fillet.
So if you missed what's going on here, these fish are scored by weight. So the winner is going to be the person with the heaviest fish. And they appear to have been stuffed not only with bits of other fish, but also with large lead weights. So these are going to be the heaviest fish. And all of those angry people around are other competitors who, of course, were denied a chance at winning because their fish were not stuffed with random objects. So this is a big deal because these fishing tournaments have a lot of money at stake. They're giving away things like entire boats. And apparently these competitors have won something like $300,000 in previous competitions. And I have some questions about that, and I'm sure lots of other people do. So one of the things that leaps out in the criminal code as a possible section to apply to this is section 209, and that is cheating at play. It says, every person who, with intent to defraud any person, cheats while playing a game or in holding the stakes for a game or in betting is guilty of either A, an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 2 years, or B, an offense punishable on summary conviction. So if we assume that these people were stuffing those weights in the fish, and I don't have a whole lot of other explanations for how those weights get in there, but I don't know. There hasn't been anything established in a court of law at this point. The intent to defraud any person would be all of those other angry competitors and also the tournament itself. You know, those are all people who are potentially being cheated out of money here. Now, the question that comes up is whether or not this is a game, because game actually has a specific definition in the Canadian Criminal Code. And there's actually case law on this. This is all the way from the Supreme Court. And this is the case of the Queen and Riseberry, as it was at the time. Now, Riseberry is a case about horse racing. Mr. Riseberry was alleged to have, he's a trainer of horses, and he was caught on video drugging one horse and caught trying to sneak syringes with drugs into the track for doing the same thing to another horse. Now, these horses were apparently named Everyone's Fantasy and Good Long Life through the long traditions of weird horse names. But he was basically trying to inject them with things that would make them run faster. So at the trial level, Mr. Riseberry was acquitted on the charge of cheating at play because they said this is not a game, because a game requires that the definition of a game here is a game of chance or mixed chance and skill, pursuant to section 197 sub 1 of the Criminal Code. So if it's a game of pure skill only, then it's not a game for that purpose, and you can't be convicted of cheating at play, which doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other things. But for instance, a pure sort of race where everyone starts at the same place and has to run would be a game of pure skill. Most shooting competitions would be a game of pure skill. So the question is horse racing a game of pure skill? And the trial judge, as mentioned, acquitted on that basis, relying on a U.S. case, Harless and United States. But the Supreme Court said, listen, that doesn't work. We can't rely on that case. And it's not because it's an American case. Canadian courts do sometimes look at American case law. The problem is that the U.S. rules are different. The U.S. divides games into only two categories. The first is games of chance, and the second is games of skill. So it has to fall into one of those two things. And so if a game is something that has both chance and skill elements, you have to determine which of those boxes it falls into. Canada, on the other hand, has a third category, and that's mixed chance and skill. So long as there is some chance involved, it goes into that mixed category, and you can be convicted on either the pure chance or mixed chance and skill but not on pure skill for the purposes of this section. So the issue with the Supreme Court here is they couldn't say, okay, well, we're just going to order a conviction on this, because at the trial level, they didn't actually have evidence on whether horse racing was pure chance or skill, but they did note that chance can be established by some fairly small things. For example, if post position, they said, is determined by a computerized random post position generator, and that certain post positions are more advantageous than others, then that can be enough to say that this is a game of mixed chance and skill. So I don't know enough about fishing tournaments to know. Like, do some people get a better spot sort of leaving the berth? I don't know. I'm not a great fisherman, and when I go out fishing, I like to say, oh, I had terrible luck out there because I didn't get any fish. But then when I came back and posted on Twitter, people were going, oh, well, here's what you were doing wrong. You were, it was too warm that day, and you should have been fishing off the bottom, not near the top. And I didn't know this stuff, so this isn't, I say that I had bad luck, but it's clear that there's more skilled fishermen than me out there. So this illustrates that whether or not he could be convicted on that charge is kind of an interesting question. There's also some situations where a game that seems like a game of pure skill might actually be a game that involves chance. And this is kind of a weird case. This is the case of the Queen and McGarry. Now, this was a case involving a fair game, a milk bottle toss. So if you've ever been to a fair and they've got those, various games, almost all of those games are rigged in some way. They are designed to make you lose. And in this case, the way that it was designed to make you lose is that the bottles all look the same, but two of the bottles at the foot of the pyramid are much heavier than the one at the top, which makes it much more difficult to knock those ones over. So the way they rig that, of course, is that if when they're demonstrating this, they'll put those heavy bottles up so that it's easy to knock everything down. And then when you play, those bottles end up at the bottom and you end up losing. So they were charged with cheating at it while playing at a game. And what the court found was that because of the sort of random position of these, heavier bottles. Now, I don't know that this is actually random. It's placed intentionally. But that made it enough of a element of chance that this was a game of mixed chance and skill. I think this is a bad decision. I think that this is a weird decision. I think they should have proceeded on another section. They also had a police officer going to the fair to test this out. And I don't know. I kind of feel like if you're at the fair, in the US, they often call them like a midway or something like that. You kind of should know that those games are all kind of scammy. That's kind of part of things. I'll also just note that it's kind of, interesting here as to all of this, because one of the elements they note, or one of the things that came out in that was they basically said, if they weren't doing this, so one witness said that if all the bottles were the same weight, and if they were all light, the operator could not stay in business, as a 4-year-old child could knock them over. This was, however, the exact visual impression given to any prospective player of the game as he looked at the pyramid, and it was that visual impression which induced the prospective player to play the game. Now, that to me doesn't sound like it's an element of chance. This to me sounds like they're saying that this is fraudulent in some fashion. So I don't really like this case, but this case exists, and you need to be aware of it if you decide, for instance, to take up a life as a carny. All right. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, is Canada just messed up? Is it okay to cheat at a game in Canada so long as it's a game of pure skill? Can you go and do a shooting competition and, dope or otherwise, sort of mess with the game? And the answer to that is no, because there's other sections that apply. And quite frankly, I think they'd be more likely to want to proceed with these other sections, such as fraud. Everyone who, by deceit, falsehood, or other fraudulent means, whether or not it is a false pretense within the meaning of this act, defrauds the public or any person, whether ascertained or not, so you don't even have to know who the person is, of any property, money, or valuable security, or any service. In the case where the subject matter of the offense is more than $5,000, the maximum punishment is 14 years. Remember how I said cheating at play takes you up to a max of 2 years? Well, 14 years is a much better maximum when you start talking about amounts like $300,000. Mr. Riesberry he was also convicted of fraud, and I suspect that the sentence he got on the fraud would have been higher than the one at the cheating at play. The Supreme Court ordered that the cheating at play charge went back for sort of a new trial. I don't know if the Crown would have even proceeded with it. I wasn't able to find that information out, but there's really good reasons why they just might have said, you know what, we don't care. We've got the fraud conviction. So assuming that they can make out that these fish were, tampered with in a deceitful fashion, I'm sure that he didn't come up to the tournament organizers and go, yo, my fish are totally stuffed with lead and other fish and whatever other garbage I could find. Like I put my house keys in there. He didn't put his house keys in there, but I'm just sort of joking for effect here. That's okay, right? The tournament organizers would have been like, actually not okay. So the fact that this would have been done surreptitiously, everyone was surprised and kind of disgusted to see those weights there, would be enough to sort of suggest that this is fraud. And I will note, the courts punish these kinds of cheating things fairly harshly. If you're caught cheating at a casino, the punishments tend to be pretty bad. Now, I'm also going to just say, don't cheat at a casino. Casinos have incredibly good surveillance cameras. They're really good at catching stuff like that. The security cameras there will just wow you. I had a file that happened in a casino, and the accused on that was sort of going, oh, well, they've got security camera footage, but what does it show? I was actually able to tell what brand of pants he was wearing at the time by zooming in enough to read the label on his pants. They're that good, and they have to be because they're intended to read people's cards so that they can tell if your cards change from one second to another. All right, so I guess that's kind of an analysis here of how the Canadian courts would deal with this. I don't know if it would be worth the Crown proceeding on a cheating at play charge, just because it would be kind of hard to prove the whole element of, is there an aspect of chance to fishing? That seems to me to be a tough issue, but the fraud seems to be a lot easier. I suspect that's how the Crown would proceed on that. All right. Thank you for watching. Please do all of the YouTube stuff with this video. Like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. Please leave a comment below. Just if you have any questions, I try to answer them in the comments, or just any thoughts on this. I mean, these guys are clearly not going to be allowed to participate in any further fishing tournaments, I suspect, but I wonder if there's any way for prior fishing tournaments to now go and try to recoup some of that money. That'll be questions for down the road, but also for the US legal system, and I mostly focus on Canada. Mostly. All right, thank you as well to my Patreon supporters. There's a link to the Patreon in the description below, but at the $50 level, Canada's National Firearms Association, the CCFR, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited. And at the $20 level, Mark, Jane Babin Luxor, Haywire, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, and Vicky. Thank you as well to the $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge.